Good morning, Sun Coast.
Promised land beneath my feet, the contrast that offends my theology. We tried to fit your ways in the boxes humans made, so either you're a heretic or you're the Son of God. You are the relapse of quiet streams and greener paths. Who knows? Ancient words, our language lacks. Scribble out the notes in the books that your friends wrote, 'cause either everyone's a heretic or they've heard the voice of God.
Oh, in my mind so that I can know you more. You break my heart so it looks more like yours. In my mind so that I can know you more. In my mind, in my mind.
Contrast, a tender word and a stomach leak, constant, mythology, capitalize the G in the name of He who believes will resurrect me.
Am I just a modern Pharisee? Do my thoughts scream? A renewed mind to just words I speak. And if you walk into my home and you make your glory known, will my tears soak your feet?
Or would I crucify you?
Oh, in my mind so that I can know you more.
There's nothing on the providence I know. No longer bound to things of wood and stone. When all I had to offer was my worst, you saw my heavy heart and loved me first. You were staring down my brokenness. You chose to throw your heart into the mix. Compassion crashing down on what was left. You were there, closing, and all is said. Like a river through my veins. You carried me all this time. Like the Spirit was breaking your shoulder. You carried me. so deep. I see you are my everything. Jesus Christ, you are my one desire. Lord, you're my only cry to know you all my life. I'm wide awake, drawing closer by grace, and all my heart is yours, and no fear removed. I breathe you in, lean into your love, and oh, your
How's everybody doing this morning? It's good to be here with you guys this morning, singing out loud. This front row's got us going. It's good. Man, we were talking about saying something before. We're going to introduce a new song just now, and I didn't even realize the song before sets this one up so well. When we can sing out, sinking into God's love and letting go of fear and diving in and trusting God, there's so much strength in that, but it's also so scary. And this next song is a song called Know You Will. And this song, for me, when I listen to this song, it's something like not a call to action, but it's an encouragement. It's an encouragement to keep looking forward. Don't settle in the past. Don't get stuck down by things that you may consider are failures. God sees the beauty in who you are, and he will always be there. So don't let things discourage you and think that God isn't going to be there through the rough times. Even if we don't understand it, we don't have to have God figured out. We don't have to have his plan figured out. We just have to be along the journey and be with him. Are you guys ready? Let's do it.
blood, you see a promise. When I see your grave, you see the door. When I'm at my end, you see where the future starts. I don't know how you make a way, but I know you will. I don't know how you make a way, but I know you will. You've been good on every promise, leading desire every day, and out of that grave. I don't know how you make a way, but I know you will. And when my world's on fire, I know that I'm in your hand. And when my heart gives way, I know that I will stand. And nothing is ever gonna surprise you. And nothing is ever made you flinch when it all shakes out. Darkness comes to stand a chance. I can make a way, but I know you will. I don't know how you make a way, but I know you will. 'Cause you've been good on every promise, eating desire through every day, and out of that grave. I don't know how you make a way, but I know you will. My heart from Egypt, you carved a road through sea. From all I've seen, story ends in love. And when we cross that Jordan, look back at where we've been. From all I've seen, come on. I don't know how you make a way, but I know you will. I don't know how you make a way, but I know you will. Well, you're good on every promise, meeting desire every day, and out of that grave. I don't know how you make a way, but I know you will. You will. Thank you guys for singing out with us. Enjoy the rest of the service.
This is a boisterous crowd, but thank you so much for being here. So today, get a chance to stand before you and talk to you about a lot of things, and we've been in this series for quite a few weeks, and we're going to jump in a minute, but just to remind you of all the good things. Life is good. School starts again this week. People are getting back in the groove of things, and as hot as it is outside, it's nice and AC in here. So, people come in hot, and they come in here and put their sweaters on, so that's the way we want it. But I'm glad that you're here. I hope that in the teaching today, when you leave here in a few minutes, you're going to go, wow, that's just what seemed like my heart needed, right? So over the last few, every week? Okay, that's good, thank you. So over the last few weeks, we've been studying Colossians, and we've looked at how Paul saw his prison circumstances. He saw his pain as an opportunity to write. He saw his negative circumstances as a positive way to proclaim Christ. Now, the central ingredient in Paul's life was Christ. And Colossians is the book that talks about Jesus more than any other book in the Bible. And we started this series a few weeks ago. We talked about the power of encouragement, how that we can never over-encourage. Remember that? I don't know anyone that ever came home and said, oh my gosh, I just can't take another encouragement today. I'm exhausted from all the encouragement. It's just not going to happen. We talked about the power of acceptance. Remember everybody brings their lunch to a buffet. So I bring my stale bologna sandwich to this buffet of grace that God has for me. We talked about acceptance. And then we talked about our faithfulness and how it grows, particularly when we use it. Last week, we used this concept, just keep looking up. And so many of you said, thanks, I needed that, because in the world we live in, all the coronavirus things, all the polarization that's happening in our world in so many different areas, we just need to look above it and rise above it. So today, we're going to look at a passage from Colossians chapter 1, verse 9, and then we're going to jump into some things I want to talk to you about. Listen to what Paul says. For this reason, since the day we heard about you, we've not stopped praying for you. We continually ask to God to fill you with the knowledge of his will through all the wisdom and understanding that the Spirit gives, so that you may live a life worthy of the Lord and please him in every way, bearing fruit in every good work, growing in the knowledge of God, being strengthened with all power according to his glorious might, so that you may have great endurance and patience. So I'm going to just pause there for a second. So you might be strengthened with all his power, I'd say energy, according to his glorious might, so that what's the result of just all this energy that God gives us? That we'll keep looking up, really. Have endurance and patience. And giving joyful thanks to the Father who has qualified you to share in the inheritance of his holy people in the kingdom of light. In 1989, when Becky and I lived in North Florida, we were in a small church pastoring, and 1989 was a terribly cold year. I think up in that area we were like in single digits, and that's cold for Florida. I mean, Sunday that year was on Christmas Eve. And we had practiced, they used to have a choir, and they were going to sing a cantata on Christmas Eve, on that Sunday of Christmas Eve. But it was so cold that the power company informed us the night before that they could not handle all the heat being turned on. They didn't have the grid work in the electrical system. So they were going to say, we're going to shut off your power for 15 minutes. You can have it for 45. We're going to shut it off for 15 minutes. Because of that, it created some concern about right in the middle of something where you're playing this audio tape back then, and all of a sudden the power goes off. Would probably not be good for the cantata. So on that Christmas Eve morning, I was at the church in my study, and it's typical, I get up very early on Sunday most days, but I was there about 5 o'clock in the morning because I wanted to turn the heat on. That's part of the pastoral job in a small church. You mow the grass, turn on the heat, all the other things. You just do it all. And so I turned the heat on by 5 o'clock. By 6 o'clock, it had gotten a little warmer in the building. But then the power company realized they were going to change it from 45 minutes on and 15 minutes off to 30 minutes on and 30 minutes off. It was like 45 or 50 degrees in the building, maybe 50 degrees, and we'd run it for a half hour, and it'd get a little bit warmer, and then it'd be off for a half hour. It'd get a little bit colder. So we just kind of played this game. Are you with me? So what happened at church time? We stood in the hall. There was no lights. Some people had candles. Some people had flashlights. This was kind of an interior hall, and we just waited until all of a sudden the power came back on. Eventually, things got back to normal. But you know what I remember is not the normal. I remember the things that are not normal. I remember the weddings where all of a sudden things don't follow exactly as planned. The flower girl decides to pour her petals out and take her shoes off, or the kid, the ring bearer, runs down the aisle. And the things that endear us are not the things that go normal. It's how do we deal with things when they don't go normally. So I'm reminded that in an event like that, even though we're waiting in the hall for the power to come back on, some of us are still waiting in the hall. You're waiting for the Spirit of Christ to come back on in your life, and somehow it got turned off for something or some reason, but we are waiting. In 2017, Hurricane Irma hit our Suncoast area. And now, you may not know this, but we opened this building. It's designed as a hurricane proof, if whatever that means. But the county wanted us to be a hurricane center. We basically said, if there's a hurricane, we'd open up ourselves, and we did kind of keep the bureaucracy out of it. But during that week, we opened it up. It was a weekend, 2017, and about 450 people sought refuge in this facility. We also had this idea that if you have a pet, we think pets are important, you could bring your pet. We had 150 dogs and cats. It was like a kennel with a lot of people. And I mean, during that storm, some of us stayed 2 nights because it was devastating. And they came in a certain place, we had to lock the doors down because the winds reached a certain level. And I remember this room, all the chairs were moved out, and it was like a refugee camp. And I went up the stairs at the back, and as I looked out, I took a video of people making their little camp here or camp there with their, dog cage or whatever they had. And it was amazing. And on that Sunday morning, I was listening to the video that I recorded, and it said, I think this is the best church service I've ever been to on a Sunday morning. Because we're serving. That's what it's about. See, the electricity was off. It was dark, but there was something powerful happening. In Acts chapter 1, verse 8, it says this, but you will receive power when the Holy Spirit, or the Spirit of Christ, comes in you. And you'll be witnesses in Jerusalem, and Judea, and Samaria, to the uttermost part of the earth. And whether we're waiting for a devastating storm to pass or waiting in the hall for power, for something to happen, I want us to discover that we can use the time waiting as an opportunity to discover more. More what? More strength? More faithfulness, more hope. See, the original message that Jesus spent his life proclaiming, the original message that the Apostle Paul repeated is that we need more love in our lives, don't we? Less animosity, less hostility, more love, more acceptance, more unity. What do you mean by unity? Not just in community, but unity in your own psyche, realizing that you and God are one. We need more in community. We realize that we are one with others. Paul writes to his friends so that they may be encouraged and love one another. And he writes to his friends so that they may experience the Spirit of Christ and discover this inner energy that comes when we connect with God. So today, I want to give you 3 suggestions. Your notes are in your hand if you can fill in the blank if you'd like. But here's the first one. Prayer is a dialogue between God and our circumstances. If you want to get connected with God, I'm going to give you 3 things that will help you. Prayer. And what is it? It's a dialogue between God and our circumstances. In Colossians chapter 1:3, listen to what Paul says. We always thank God the Father of the Lord Jesus Christ when we pray for you because we've heard of your faith, we've heard about Christ and the love that you have for him and the love you have for one another. So here's a question I ask you. How can you and I find more spiritual energy in our lives? How can you and I discover a life that's more authentic and lived out in faithfulness? And here the answer to that is it begins with a realization that prayer is an awareness. Prayer is a dialogue between God and me. It's not really just coming up with a list of things I want to talk to him about, but it's about our issues. Prayer is not what I do, it becomes part of who I am. Have you ever heard the expression being in the zone? In sports, it's like Michael Jordan when he was playing basketball, man, he was in the zone, and sometimes he just could not miss. If a game was on the line, you give the ball to Michael Jordan, he's in the zone. Or a golfer who gets in the zone and he hits the shot after shot that every shot is his best shot. Or a quarterback who completes 20 passes in a row. They're tuned in, they're in the rhythm, they're in sync, they're in the zone. And this is what I want to suggest. When I take time to pray and connect with God, I can discover a time that I'm in the zone. So have you ever been in the zone spiritually? What does it look like? It's like this internal conversation with God all day long. God, I know this is good. I don't go around talking Jesus talk all the time, but I go around with Jesus thought all the time. I want to make a difference. I want my life to be lived out. My prayer is not a stop and say out loud, thank you, God, for this food, even though I think it's important to pray for your food. Have you ever eaten and not prayed for it? I have. It's really embarrassing when you're with some of your friends and the pastor forgets to pray. But my heart is always grateful. My prayer is not reading a list of prayer requests like a shopping list. My prayer is thinking, sometimes thinking out loud, but it's this continual awareness, God, you are with me every moment of every day, and I'm aware of that, and I know that to be true, and forgive me when I forget that. So that's the first thing. Prayer is a dialogue between God and our circumstances. Let me give you the second thing. The energy of God within me is tapped through prayer. See, when we open our lives to Christ and we embrace His Spirit into our hearts, something happens and it changes us. For me, I discovered this amazing freedom from guilt. And we discover this energy that helps me live a life that is less of me and more Christ-like in its appearance. Do you know that you and I can be kinder? You and I can be more pleasant. We don't have to be angry about different things. And we can maintain my relationship with people, with my loved ones over a lifetime, and I can maintain my relationship with God over the same time. But here's the problem. Sometimes we struggle. Have you ever struggled? Of course you have. I mean, have you ever wrestled with life's issues? You say, of course I have. I'd say, well, like what? With cancer? Health issues? Relationships? Divorce? In-laws? I'm just saying. We wrestle with life and we're looking for more. Jesus says in John, I am the vine, you are the branches. Stay connected to me because I'm the source of life. Just this past week, the power in my home went out 3 times. Can you imagine? It goes out, it doesn't go out that much, but one day, 2 hours in the morning. The next day, it was like 4 hours early morning. The next day, 5 hours early morning. And it was, what did it do when you don't have any power? Well, it's kind of dark. The air conditioning doesn't run, even though it never got hot because it's early morning. But it was okay. And you can look in perspective. You know, my power's out for a few hours. Is that the end of the world? Well, I live in a place where when we don't have power, we don't have water. So it gets a little more tricky, but it's only 4 hours. Can you make it for 4 hours without electricity? I'm trying to. Can you do it without whining? Absolutely not. I mean, we have to whine about things. So have you ever been in a power outage, a snowstorm, an ice storm, or a hurricane? Well, today, I have a friend of mine. I'm going to invite him out this time. His name is Paul Michael. And you may have met Paul Michael. You may not have met him, but you know him by his other name that I'll call him when he comes out. So here he comes. That's right. Stand right here so you're in the light. This is Cuz. If you've never met Cuz, now you have. You hear me talking about him. He's a great sermon illustration. But I'll tell you, there's some positive things about his life that I want to talk about today. So let me ask you some questions. Make sure you pull that mic up close. But where do you live now?
I live near Tallahassee, Florida, a little town called Monticello. In fact, it's the town Cuz told the story about the cold. The same town.
Same town.
Yeah.
They don't have electricity very well either.
Yeah.
So what do you do there? What's your occupation?
Yeah, I teach for Flagler College on a satellite campus over in Tallahassee.
What do you teach?
I teach business and finance. Yeah.
So teach business and finance at the university, at the college there. Interesting. And you live up there in the Monticello, Tallahassee area. But let's talk about, just for a minute, and you didn't always live there. Where did you live before that?
Well, we were both born in Tennessee, near Nashville, Cuz and I. But we lived in Homestead, Florida, previous to Monticello. Yeah.
So in 1991, where'd you live?
We lived in Homestead, Florida. Yeah.
Does anybody remember what happened in actually August 1992, right? 92. August 1992. Was a hurricane there? Tell us about the hurricane. What was it called?
Was anybody else in Miami or Homestead for Hurricane Andrew?
There's one back there.
Okay, all right. So what's your question?
Well, so, it's a good question. In 1992, Hurricane Andrew devastated Homestead.
It did.
and you lived there. How did you prepare for the storm?
Well, fortunately, you might have thought, a lot of people would have thought I over-prepared, but it turned out to be a really good thing. So I had plywood. We lived in a cedar home, so I lagged into my nice cedar house, fairly new, plywood, covered every window, every door except one was covered with plywood, lagged in. And we had a nursery. We'd made preparation there too.
So when the storm hit, your windows were boarded up. Mm-hmm. What was it like for you? What did it sound like as you went through the first half of the storm?
Yeah, when I put the plywood up, we went inside and it was like total darkness inside with the lights off. So I said, well, I'm going to cut a little hole into the glass sliding door so we can see out. But during the storm, it was just so much noise. You hear about the screaming of the wind, but what I hadn't heard about was all the things that slam into your house. And I'm talking about motorcycles and sheds, riding lawnmowers, just banging into our wood frame house. Most homes down there are concrete block. Ours was wood frame. I had taken extra precaution. We built it a little stronger than code. But those slams into the house were terrifying. We never went near that little peephole. Scared to death because it was a big ceiling in there, and it's just terrifying.
So you made it through the first half of the storm, then the eye of the storm. Tell me what you did in the eye of the storm.
Yeah, so the eye, if you've not been through a hurricane, it truly is just calm, serene. Believe me, we were scared to death to go near a window or door even after it got calm. This was a terrifying noise, and when the storm was raging. So we did, our telephone still worked, so we called our neighbor, who's my wife's brother. Just, half-acre lots there, they're right there. So we called, his phone rang, and I said, Bill, you guys doing all right over there? And I said, how's it going over there? He said, not so good. He said, all of our windows have blown in. Our French doors have blown in. And I was like, I couldn't picture with the noise I was hearing what it must be like to be in a house with all that wind blowing through it. So I said, you guys want to come over here? He said, yeah, I think we should. So I was pretty scared to even open the door. But when we looked out, it was real steamy, real calm, stars shining. It was nighttime. And, all the trees were blown over. Again, the toolboxes, glass, stuff strewn, insulation, building materials everywhere. So I made my way over there. Bill, I started calling for him, and he didn't come. So I ran over there, and Bill was really in shock. He was just, and his wife comes out, and what is it, Paul? I said, you guys are coming to you've heard that when the eye wall comes, the other side, it slams, it hits hard. So I was very anxious to get back to our house. Anyway, we got their kids, and eventually Bill, was nearly a zombie. We got him over and got in the house.
And you guys sat through the second half of the storm.
We did. Yeah. There wasn't any sleeping, I assure you.
So one of the things you said to me earlier, that when you looked out, you actually saw cars driving in the eye of the storm. Why would anybody be driving during the eye of the storm?
Unbelievable. After what we'd been through, to see headlights, and we were like, what is going on? And we learned later, these were people whose houses had partially blown down, and they were looking for somewhere to go. And I know of several cases, I heard of people that there was no place to go. They would drive through someone's garage drawer, just bust right through it with their car just to get refuge when the storm started back. So it was that drastic.
So the storm's over finally. It went through the night. You're up all night hearing things hit your house like boat trailers and campers all night long, and your brother-in-law's there sharing the space with you. The next morning, you went outside. What was it like when you went out after the storm was over?
It was like a war zone. I mean, it's just debris everywhere. Again, we had a plant nursery that was just devastated. It really was a hopeless feeling that how do you ever recover from this? We were one of the few houses that did not lose trusses. So our trusses stayed in. We lost some shingles, but our house, this wooden house, came through pretty good, but it was devastated out there.
So when help started to arrive, where did the help come from, and what kind of help did you receive?
you know, hats off to the Red Cross. They come around with ice and water. You know, anyone, and one thing my wife mentioned is that, you know, it creates a cohesiveness with your family and your neighbors, that kind of trauma. So if we could get a resource or somebody in the family or a neighbor got ice, then you'd share that around, you know. It was a little mixed when the military, train loads of military vehicles start coming. There was looting because there's people that couldn't get water. And we had no electric, of course. And Cuz was pastoring a church in Sarasota, I believe. Was it Sarasota? Uh-huh. And he brought, in fact, pretty quickly, a Cuz and one guy came down and brought us, I think, a generator, lots of water, things you could get nothing. You know, the stores that had made it through got looted immediately, and there was just no resources. You know, you had whatever you had before the storm, so that was a huge help. And later, Cuz returned. I'm sorry, you know, we call each other Cuz. You might have caught on to that. He brought a crew of people down. I had a tree farm, 10 to 20 foot trees, and it was pretty large. We had 100 acres of trees. And all of them, every one, blown down, just mangled, twisted up, some of them broken off. And I really didn't think it was recoverable. Now, I thought that, you know, we were done. But Cuz called and asked and offered to bring a crew, to bring people from his church and community to come down and help us. And after some period of time, you know, I said, okay. Yeah, I wasn't even sure it was worth it. But it did get us started recovery, and we were able to recover significant amount of the tree farm. One thing I'll mention too is after the storm, we had our cell phone. This was before cell phones, but I had a radio phone for the nursery. And so I'd called him, or he called me and talked about it. Well, then it quit. The radio tower, the huge towers, that had blown down. In fact, the transmission lines near our house, that they're like 3 foot square with big steel inside, every one of them snapped off at the ground. That was the severity of this. Anyway, so we had no phones. There was one, we heard of a house about a half a mile from ours that there was a phone that worked, and the people had left. A lot of people just left their houses, moved up north with family or whatever. So we would go in this, I remember one night, going over there, walking in this house, somebody's home, door standing open, the roof was gone. This is a new house, you know, a couple years old, roof gone, and looking up and finding the phone in the mess in there and calling Cuz. And we planned bringing this crew down to help us out. So
yeah, it's amazing.
Bizarre, yeah.
So after all that's over, I want to ask, you know, there was guys that trimmed trees. I mean, we came down and we brought things, and a crew of guys. I mean, I want you guys to hear. I was out there with the 12 guys standing up trees all day long. Manual labor. I'd say, guys, there's a tree, stand that one up, stand that one up. So, yeah, we all do what we can do. But how long were you without electricity?
6 weeks. We had no power. And we just came yesterday from Homestead. I went down to handle some family business, and it is, you guys, I don't know if you think it, do you think it's humid here?
Yeah.
Well, drive about 4 hours south, and you'll be thankful for Sarasota. It's just oppressive humidity and heat, and that's what it was August this month that Andrew happened, and we had no power. So imagine living like that for 6 weeks.
Yeah, and I went down for about a week after that, and it was hot and it was muggy. But 6 weeks without electricity, the irony is he came back to Sarasota to visit us 6 weeks after the storm. And I don't know if you remember, but your power came on while you were in Sarasota visiting us.
Oh, yeah.
So he's able to go back and then at least to have that. But I want to ask another question. Any post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, following that experience?
You know, I'm a finance professor, okay? I think in rows and columns. I think of myself as not really emotional. But after the Andrew, any evidence of a storm, you know, clouds, or maybe, I don't know if we feel barometric changes, our bodies, but you would have a nervousness. my wife, everybody. It was like just, I'd never experienced that. It really make you nervous. And I'll tell you, to this day, my wife's favorite person is our local weatherman, Rob Nucatola. And as she tracks any storm, anything that's coming, she's on her phone watching, and I really think it's a leftover of Andrew.
Any lessons from living through a devastating storm?
Yeah, for sure. I can tell you when you're in that really difficult place, everything, something tragic's happened, having some help is really helpful. So, yeah. And a few weeks ago, I think Cuz told you guys about Holly Zinn.
Yeah.
Well, it was a small thing on our part, but I can tell you it really feels good.
Yeah. Feels good to help, doesn't it? Thank you, Cuz. I appreciate your help today. Thank you.
Yep.
So that's the guy that, I refer to him a lot as Cuz because we grew up together less than a year apart, closer than a brother. And, grew up to where when my little brothers were born, I stayed at his house. We've known each other our entire lives. And dear friend, and his wife is here too today, which you get a chance to meet Honeybee. She was actually our maid of honor, so a long time ago. So in 1992, that happened. In 2004, some of you were affected by Hurricane Charlie. It hit Southwest Florida. No refrigeration, spoon foiled, no hot water, only cold showers, no banking, no gas station, grocery stores. But when you're able to restore power, it's amazing how smiles begin to happen. I don't know about you, but I smile a little better in air conditioning. I smile a little better when I'm comfortable. And the teaching of Jesus, though, is to help us stay connected to the source, to the energy source. How do we do that? We stay connected when we reflect on life. Paul writes to his friends, continue to live in him, rooted and built up in him, strengthened in all faithfulness and overflowing with thankfulness, which leads to the third truth of the day. And it's this: when my heart is concerned for others, there's something happening in me. See, prayer has this interesting dimension. It's realizing that something's going on. It's realizing the energy of God is within me. I just need to tap into it. But when my heart is concerned for others, it's an evidence that something is happening. Paul writes to this group, he says, I'm praying for you, and I remember you. Last week was my mother's 95th birthday. You heard me talk about that. We honored her. We celebrated her life. It was a celebration of all the good things, all her kids. And you know what's really amazing? She was there. Sometimes we only wait until they're gone, and then we gather. One of the benefits to do that now, we honor others by remembering them. On September 4th this year, on this stage, I'm going to have Pete Abbott. He's out here right now. Pete and I are going to share the stage as he discusses what happened in 9/11. Pete was on the scene during that time, and his story is amazing. But we honor those as we remember them. Remember your loved ones. Listen to what Paul is saying. Remember them. Live a life worthy. Please them. Bear fruit. And if you do, you'll be strengthened with all power and endurance, etc. Years ago, I used to take a magazine called Bottom Line Magazine. And he talked about better decision making. And this is a suggestion from a business magazine. You want to make better decisions, move away from the problem when the same solution keeps coming up. Doesn't seem to be quite right. Also move away when you're frustrated, when you have trouble concentrating, when you can't focus, when you feel irritable, stressed, fatigued, have trouble articulating your thoughts. And here's some suggestions. Take a break, a vacation, a day or two off, or just some time alone in your office to find inner calm, mental clarity, and a sense of determination. Now, this is from a business magazine, but it really reflects what Paul is writing in Colossians. Because when we remember, it's a process. Prayer puts us back on track, reminds us of who we are, what we are, and our connection with God. Many years ago, I did a wedding for a couple that attend here occasionally, Dana and Blake Anderson. Years ago, and when we were about ready to, in the church, everything's set up for this beautiful wedding, and all of a sudden you hear this boom outside, and the transformer blew up, and all the lights went off in the church. So you have this fancy wedding, and what did they do? They got a boom box, and they played Here Comes the Bride with a boom box, and we spoke into the, kind of leave the doors open so you could have some light in this dark auditorium. And it's amazing, we discovered later, what happened is some squirrels were running back and forth on the line, and the squirrel shorted something out and blew the fusible link, and that's what happened. Squirrels. I began to think, man, most of the problems in my life come from the squirrels. Say, what do you mean? Well, squirrels of judgmentalism, squirrels of heated debate, squirrels of anger or fear. Sometimes we let the squirrels or the storm keep us from our God connection. Or maybe we're waiting in the hall for the lights to come back on. I've noticed a power shortage in your life and mine is related to one thing, and that's being tuned into the presence of Christ in our lives. So let me encourage you, keep your minds open. Anything that you're struggling with and clenching, open your hands and turn them over and let those things go. Because the presence of Christ in you can make all the difference in the world. Can I pray for you? Father, thanks for these moments we have together, for the challenge to be reminded that we can be in the zone spiritually. Let's focus on you. Withdraw from the circumstance and realize the energy, the power that is Jesus Christ living in us can change our perspective in our lives. Thank you for your love and grace. We celebrate your presence today. In Christ's name, amen. So would you stand, please? I'm going to tell you a little closing story and give you some direction. You have your sermon notes in front of you, right? If you have those notes, you might want to pull them out for a minute. But this week, when the power went on and off in my home for a few times, I began to practice an old prayer technique. It works for me. I want to share it with you. Something practical. It's a takeaway today. Outside the back of this building, there's a garden, a memorial garden or a garden where we've done funerals and weddings type thing, but it's a place for reflection. There's kind of park benches back there. And I went into the garden this week and I practiced this prayer. I've done it more places, but this one specifically. It's from Psalm 46:10. And this is what I want you to notice that it says. Be still and know that I am God. I think every one of us can memorize that. That's not hard, is it? So here's the prayer. As I pray this and I reflect, be still and know that I am God, and pause. Then I'm going to take a word off. Be still and know that I am. And the words I am, that's what Moses heard in the burning bush. It's who God is. Be still and know that I'm enough. I'm accepted. I'm loved by God. Be still and know that there's things coming, but it's going to be okay. Be still and know. Experience the fullness of God. Be still and let's get rid of some stress. Anything other than being still, I want to drop it away. And then be still. Be quiet. And be. When I pray this prayer, my life is flooded with awareness that God is with me, that he loves me. Be still and know that he loves you today. And so do I. God bless. Thanks for coming.